For my marine conservation project or presentation today, I'll be doing Osprey biology and ecology. Just to go over sources real quick before we begin. All the pictures throughout the presentation have the sources of the picture listed below them, and there's also a slide at the end of this presentation for reference for the pictures. For all the bullet points, I have a Roman numeral system, and each bullet point has a Roman numeral at the end of it. If a source was used to go through that source list, it's 1 through 4. Number 1 being Birds of the World, Cornell Lab of Ornithology. Number 2 is Relationship Between Prey Species Ecology and Dive Success in Ospreys. It's an academic paper by Joe Swenson. Number 3 will be Human Osprey Conflicts, another academic paper by Brian E. Washburn. And number 4 will be A Case of DDT by the Environmental Protection Agency. And all these sources, like I just said, are listed at the end of the bullet points in Roman numerals 1 through 4. And also there is a slide at the end of this presentation with all these sources and links to their websites available. Let's go ahead and begin. So you have Pandion haliatus. I hope I'm saying that right, but that is the scientific name of the osprey. The distribution range is pretty wide and significant. I didn't realize this until researching or starting to research. It includes all of North America, pretty much, parts of South America, large parts, pretty much all around Africa, except for, of course, the Sahara Desert, all over here in the Indo-Pacific, China, and pretty much is a giant bandwidth across Euro-Asia, or Asia-Europe, not sure how to pronounce that, from Norway all the way to almost Mongolia and China right here. These birds are migratory, even though they do have year-round locations, but compared to the migratory span of habitat, it's quite significantly smaller. So they are migratory, which has led to at least sightings in 48 different U.S. states when they're moving from specifically South America, their non-breeding locations, all the way back up to their breeding locations in North Canada. So while they may not live permanently in a majority of the U.S. states, they are seen and they do actively hunt on their way to migration, in fact, different environments on their way to their breeding grounds throughout the United States. Osprey habitats vary greatly. They are very adaptable critters in both urban and wild environments. But there are several commonalities, or 3 specifically, that all these areas they inhabit must have, especially for breeding and raising young. Accessible fish supply in relatively shallow water, preferably around 0.5 to 2 meters deep. Elevated nesting sites, such as telephone poles or trees, and that's just to have sufficient, and they don't have to be elevated necessarily. It's just there needs to be sufficient protection from predators. So they have obviously protection for their chicks to help raise the fledglings until they're big enough to fend for themselves and fly. And of course, for also the chick safety and well-being, a long enough ice-free period during the raising of the fledglings, so they may become strong enough to survive harsher conditions and climates when they do come. Migrating ospreys, as I mentioned earlier, temporarily inhabit places without these commonalities, but they do leave eventually to find more suitable areas with these commonalities in order to successfully raise young. Moving on to osprey behavior, ospreys are rarely observed walking. They are big-time flyers. They ride thermal or hot air thermal currents, like to glide, save as much energy as possible. They have been clocked. The average is 45 to 50 kilometers per hour, but according to the Birds of the World Cornell Lab of Ornithology website, there have been cases of ospreys flying up to 80 kilometers per hour, which is very impressive for a raptor. Ospreys actively keep themselves clean and preen, bathe themselves. They utilize both fresh and salt water, and like ducks, they waddle into the shallows and just wash themselves off, pluck any feathers when they're different plumage seasons, and just keep themselves in tip-top clean shape. Another unique thing I learned about ospreys I didn't know until I started researching is different nests, which is usually a pair of a male and female bird, 2 to 3, let's say, around the lake, will form a little neighborhood kind of community. And working together, they'll run off foreign or intruding ospreys who wish to use their territory or use their food source. And by doing this, they can help each other and increase their survival rates of their young. As we get into osprey courtship and reproduction later on in the presentation, we'll talk more about osprey colonies. That's for a couple slides down, so we'll continue to move on to osprey displays. Now, these displays come from ospreys when they are fighting each other. Big part of osprey's life is conflict for nesting and hunting grounds. So we'll get into it. You have your first display, which if you see an osprey with a vertical body axis, wings slightly open, extended neck, he feels slightly threatened and he's curious, he or she. You have your protection slash defensive stance. That's when the osprey feels like things are starting to heat up and it feels more threatened. Wings are held tight to the horizontal body. The female osprey specifically raises loud guard calls to call back the male if possible, or other ospreys in the area. They have a rising and contracting tail movement sometimes, and a very ominous, glaring stare at you. Now, if things get into fighting or active fencing, as you can see in both pictures on the left, you have a more intense display of the previous stance I just mentioned, the protection defensive stance. And the fights can last shortly, they can last a while, but rarely do end up in fatalities. Usually they're just a little scuffle, little fight, and then both parties move on, not willing to risk their lives. Excuse me. Now, my favorite thing about raptors is the plunge diving, and this is probably the most interesting part that I enjoyed researching in my presentation. Ospreys have pretty much one major food choice, with 99% of all recorded osprey catches being fish, both freshwater and saltwater. Other species that have been recorded are very similar to the diet of other birds of prey, hawks specifically, red-tailed, red-shouldered hawks, birds, snake, voles, squirrels, pretty much just anything they can get their claws on or talons on. When fish is not available, they're not afraid to be opportunistic. It's better to eat something you don't like than to die, in my opinion. I agree with them on that. They have been observed hunting 80 different species worldwide with different regionalities and local populations of ospreys. However, with each little community of ospreys, they tend to only depend on 2 to 3 different species of fish in that area for the majority of their diet. And of these 2 to 3 species, they seem to prefer benthic fish, and this is theoried. The reason for this is theoried by the academic paper Relationship Between Prey Species and Ecology and Dive Success in Ospreys by John Swenson to be that morphological and biological adaptations of benthic fish cause them to focus more for procuring food on the bottom and to be less perceptive of upward attacks. So that really helps the osprey out, get the jump on these fish and get a quick meal. When they do go on the hunt, they fly 10 to 40 meters. In the ocean, it has been recorded ospreys flying up to 200 meters. Once again, that's from birdsoftheworld.org, the Cornell Lab of Ornithology. But flying to a safe height, or a good height, I'd rather say, when they spot a school of fish with their incredible eyesight, they will plunge towards its prey, tuck their wings in, they'll put their talons facing forward, and they'll grab the fish, ascend rapidly, and return to a safe location to eat the fish or to feed it to their fledglings or chicks. When available, ospreys will use hunting perches just to gaze and then launch off the hunting perch to attack the fish. That's to save energy. And with all the hunting successes combined and hunting failures combined of ospreys, you get the mean success dive rate of ospreys, which is found to be at 26%, but it has been recorded, such as a community of ospreys in southern Humboldt Bay, California, that they can have a success rate up to 80%, which is quite incredible. Both those figures found in the birdsoftheworld.org Cornell Lab of Ornithology website. Now, reproduction and nesting. Ospreys are solitary for most of their lives and come together usually during breeding seasons. There are cases of large colonies of ospreys, such as the one in Gardner Island, New York being an example. The ospreys in this colonies have expressed unique behaviors not seen with other ospreys. They communicate with each other. They're able to transfer information on prey locations, and just really help each other maximize hunting efficiency and safety for their osprey and help each other's survival chances. Osprey breeding season is heavily regional depending on where on the north or south hemisphere, just wherever these ospreys are located on a global scale. But it's safe to say that they prefer to nest, especially in the northern hemisphere, more North America type area, from early fall to early spring. In North America, I believe, according once again to the birdsoftheworld.org, um, that early November to late April is usually when you see ospreys breeding and reproducing and laying eggs and hatching chicks. Um, of course, ospreys, if not in a community, can be territorial over the nesting grounds. Disputes occur, but they are rarely recorded in wintering populations or in populations not during breeding season. Ospreys are generally monogamous, but several cases of polygamy have been recorded in places such as Massachusetts and South Carolina. And how that usually works is one male tries to feed two different female nests who are close by. Usually it doesn't work, but rarely it does. When paired, nest construction involves the efforts of both. The male brings materials such as sticks to the female, and the female is the architect of the project. She then builds the nest to her liking. And when these nests are abandoned after breeding season, they are utilized by the following birds: tree swallows, common grackles, house sparrows, to name a few. And pretty funny how not only does the nest help them breed, but they also help countless other species breed. So the architecture and house building project of the osprey really does go a long way in different ecological communities across the globe. Moving on, last but not least, we get into osprey conservation. And one of the biggest helpers of osprey since 1972 was the banning of DDT. DDT was linked to eggshell thinning in the birds of prey nest. Different birds of prey, including hawks, eagles, other such birds, raptors. Like I said, were banned in 1972 due to it being correlated with eggshell thinning. And as soon as it was banned, it was correlated also with population recovery across different birds of prey species. Here's a little quote from the case of DDT EPA. The recovery of the bird populations after the use of DDT was banned is an example of mitigation of the effect following manipulation of the cause and is very strong evidence that the use of DDT was, in fact, the true cause of bald eagle and other bird of prey populations declines. So since this ban, osprey populations have steadily inclined and rapidly inclined, some would say, in the past few years due to further conservation efforts in different locations. We are starting to see more conflict between ospreys and humans. Like I just said, due to the adaptability of ospreys in both the wild and urban environments, there have been several concerns rising with confrontations. And the big three include ospreys utilizing industries such as aquaculture for food. This is a double-edged sword where not only does the osprey take food from aquaculture farmers and cut into profit, but also the osprey might be exposed to any contaminants or anything that might harm them that's in the aquaculture that they use or in the actual product or fish, let's say, they're raising in the aquaculture itself. So that's definitely a concern for both biologists and farmers or aquaculture farmers. Another issue with industry is wind turbines. Like I previously mentioned in this presentation, ospreys are migratory birds. Obviously, having giant spinning fans in the sky might cause issues with collisions with the birds. There have been several studies showing this, and it's mentioned in this here Human Osprey Conflicts, Brian E. Washburn. And especially get over to windy places out in California. It's particularly a large waterfowl area or a flyway. You start to see a larger evidence of impacts between birds and windmills. Moving on, you get the ospreys using utility and communication infrastructure as nesting locations. This can cause issues between blackouts, broken power lines, collisions with the power lines, massive explosions. I mean, it can get crazy, or it could just be as simple as it can disrupt your cell phone signal due to them building nest. And I love that picture in the top right I have here of the dude. He looks absolutely flabbergasted. I'm not sure what he's going to do with these two ospreys, but they're causing quite a ruckus here on his little tower. Last but not least, you have ospreys colliding with aircraft when nesting near airfields, and this has become a growing concern with growing populations of osprey. If you look to the right here, I have a little figure from source number 3 here, Human Osprey Conflicts by Brian E. Washburn, figure 2. And it shows the total collisions of ospreys between 1990 and 2011 with both civilian and military aircraft. Civilian total is 215, and the military is 40. As you can see here on the graphic, it steadily increases over time. It does look like there's been a significant drop in military impacts, but obviously, as osprey populations continue to increase and as air flights and air travel continues to increase as well, although it's been interesting seeing the development of different airlining industries after COVID, but we'll stay tuned to get more information on how that affects this collision rate. But it's foreseeable that this rate is probably going to continue to increase over time. I have a little quote here from Human Osprey Conflicts by Brian E. Washburn explaining this. The expansion breeding of osprey populations combined with the species' ability to successfully adapt to human encroachment and development has resulted in a growing concern to civilian and military aviation. And here are my sources for throughout. Like I said, I have them in Roman numerals listed 1 through 4 and all the links to the websites. And I have all the pictures listed in numeral order just based on which order they appear throughout the presentation. And once again, the sources for the pictures are also under the pictures. Thank you for listening to my presentation, and I hope you have a wonderful weekend.